Hi, I'm Doug Spangler and I welcome you to Get Ready, Get Healthy. Today we'll be talking about some easy steps you can take so that you and your family are better prepared for emergency situations. Today we'll learn how to make a first aid kit, an emergency plan, and some basic techniques such as shelter in place and duck cover and hold. Earthquakes are a reality in California, and Contra Costa County has at least 5 active fault systems. Disasters like the Loma Prieta earthquake of '89 presented many challenges to residents and to government services. In addition to earthquakes and a number of other disasters that are possible in Contra Costa County, the tragedy of 9/11 emphasized yet another reason why it's so important to plan for emergencies. During emergencies, whether man-made or natural, emergency response personnel could likely be overwhelmed with calls for assistance and thus unable to respond to many requests during the first 72 hours. The ability for individuals, families, and neighbors to help themselves and each other during these times is essential to coping with the emergency. Well, making preparations now provides individuals and families with a greater sense of security and self-sufficiency when an emergency does occur. Well, here to provide us with more information is Dan Guerra with Contra Costa Health Services. He's the department's Emergency Preparedness Manager, and his responsibilities include coordinating the planning and response efforts for the Health Services Department in the event of an emergency. Welcome, Dan. Also here is Tracy Hine with the Contra Costa Office of Emergency Services. She is the Emergency Service Manager for the Office of Emergency Services. Her department is responsible for coordinating, training, and planning with emergency response agencies. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
First of all, let's ask what types of disasters are we here in Contra Costa really should be concerned about?
We've got several kinds of both natural and man-made hazards. We typically focus on earthquake, as you mentioned, flooding, wildfire, chemical emergencies, and though while very unlikely, you hit on it, the fact that there is a possibility of a terrorism emergency here in the county.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's quite a lot to really be thinking about. So why is it necessary to be prepared for any of these disasters?
Well, you have to look at the conditions that will occur during a crisis. And some of the things that we're accustomed to having, like a hot shower in the morning or preparing our food that we normally take for granted, may not be there and available in a disaster setting. Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say reality, as you pointed it out, people may be on their own because emergency officials may not be able to get to them for at least 72 hours.
So we need an emergency plan for our family. What should we be thinking about that would be in an emergency plan for our families?
Well, first you need to focus on the fact that you may be alone for 72 hours, as we've tried to emphasize. You need to look at your home, make sure that you know evacuation routes, different than your front door that you typically go out of. You need to have emergency preparedness supplies and first aid kits, that type of thing, so that everyone knows what's available in your home and you practice an emergency plan as well.
Practice is important. What kinds of things do we need in our supply kit? I understand we need to have something stored up, ready to go.
Well, if you look here right on the table, we've got some examples of what we need. You need non-perishable foods and water.
Now here's some stuff here.
Exactly. We've got a radio with batteries. It needs to have that. Flashlight, you need extra batteries for those. A number of other things, including a first aid kit, which I know Dan will talk about in just a second. But the other thing we really try to emphasize for people is if you need prescription drugs or have prescription eyeglasses, make sure you don't forget those things as well, because they may not be available on your day-to-day basis. And then I know, Dan, you wanted to...
Tell me about the first aid kit.
Okay, so somebody is injured in your family or in your neighborhood, even yourself, and you don't want to have to go looking around for basic supplies to treat yourself. So my family put together a kit that we carry in the car, and so are each of our cars. And it comes with a gym bag and some of these supplies. But the first aid kit, my wife being a nurse, assembled this for us, and so there's a thermometer so we can find out who may be ill, and there's a triple antibiotic ointment, various size bandages, gauze, some medications like ibuprofen, Benadryl, and antihistamine, gloves. We have in here some scissors, tweezers, things like that. And that is what I would consider a basic emergency supply kit.
Yeah. So just more things than just your basic couple of Band-Aids and some salve.
Right.
Right. Now we mentioned there's some food and water here. How much food and water should we be actually thinking of putting aside?
What we typically tell people as a general rule as far as water is a gallon of water per person per day. So you're looking at 3 days if you're looking at the 72 hours or so. And that's not for excess water use. That's for drinking and light washing only. If you can have additional water on hand, that's great. But again, then a food supply for at least 72 hours as well.
Food. And so give me some ideas about food. Canned foods, we talked earlier before the show. Some canned foods that would be good.
Canned foods, freeze-dried foods, things that are considered non-perishable.
Oh, okay. And some extra water maybe if you're able to cook?
Oh, yes.
In addition to the stuff you're talking about?
Exactly. That would be a good benefit.
All right. I want to get this right. You said a gallon of water per day?
We recommend a gallon of water per person per day at a minimum.
Okay. So that would be like how many of these 6-packs would you say?
You're going to ask me to do math on this now. Let's just say a lot of them.
Okay. All right. So as many as you get. And these things go on sale quite frequently, so they're easy to stock up.
Exactly.
And how often should we be rotating these supplies?
I would recommend every 6 months. Try to use them and rotate them as part of your normal use.
Okay.
Many people will put aside larger containers of water. You may want to add some preservative to the water, like a few drops of chlorine bleach. And then dumping it out and pouring it, filling it up. Perhaps every 6 months with the time change would be a good idea.
Great idea. Now, I like the idea that you have this little bag, and you said that was for your car.
Yes.
And so having one for the car, I would have never thought of. So having something like that in the car, because you might be out someplace, and then having something very similar in your home, in a place where everybody knows it's at.
Exactly.
Especially regarding the car. That's the thing about a disaster. You never know when it's going to strike, and you don't know where you're going to be or where your family members are going to be. So probably if you're at the office or if you're even on the freeway and then things just come to a stop, then you have something in your car that will help you to not, it won't be a panic.
Yeah, I like that idea too. I hadn't thought about that myself because I was thinking only about the home. Speaking of the home, how can we make our homes safer for any of the disasters that might occur?
First thing to do is just look around and see what, especially like in an earthquake, could be falling on you. Are there high bookshelves, are there high vases, any of those types of things. Anything that may be shaken and fall and hurt you is a good way to at least get started. And then again, having the things like the evacuation routes and also a gathering point. That's sort of after you've made your house safe and are able to, all family members should know where down the street, if that be the case, where a gathering point should be.
Now, why down the street?
Well, it could be across the street. It could be away if your house is on fire. You don't want it to be right there.
Right in
you want to
yard,
have, it should be close, but in a safe area. And it may be an easily identified place, like the fire hydrant 2 blocks away or someone else's house, perhaps.
Well, you may not be able to get into your neighborhood also. For whatever reason, the police or fire may cordon off whole areas, and then if you're expecting to reunite with your family near your house, it's not going to happen. So you might choose a nearby school that's just out of the area to as your out of area to reunite for contact.
Sure. That makes sense because usually schools have large playgrounds, open spaces, and so forth that would be a little safer than being close to buildings and so on.
Right. One of the key things I wanted to add that we didn't talk about being in the kit is making sure you have a list of contact people and their phone numbers that everyone is familiar with, and especially having an out-of-state contact person that everyone knows that if something should happen and you're not together, that you should call that person and report through them that you're okay. And the reason we recommend out-of-state is long-distance lines may be available before local lines are. And so that allows you to have some sort of contact with your family, if not directly, at least through someone
That's
you
a
know.
good point, because that happened to me, I think, during the Loma Prieta earthquake, where we called out to let people know we're okay, don't worry about it, and then we tried to call a little bit later, and the phones were just completely down and everything. So I think that's a good idea. That actually happened to me, so that's
You
a good...
know.
Yes. Yeah.
I was going to follow up on your question about how do you make a plan. The plan really for your family should be tailored to whatever the local hazard might be. If you live out in the islands in East County, if it's a flood zone, that's the disaster or possible disaster you might want to plan for failing levees. If you live in the hillside areas that's thickly wooded, then wildland fire could possibly be the threat to your family. So as you make your plan, use your imagination of what those conditions may be like should an emergency like that threaten your family. And so
it's a good idea to, we're talking about family, so that means sit down with the kids.
Yes.
And really discuss these things.
Exactly.
And so that they're really clear on all the details that you come up with, and maybe they have some ideas to put in the kits. You know, maybe a teddy bear for the child or something.
Exactly. And reading materials,
like
those types of
reading
things.
materials, yeah. The more we sit around and talk about it, the more things we come up with on the kit. That's very, very important. But I like the phone numbers as well. We got a little off track on the being home safe. What are some other ideas about making our homes safer for the disasters?
You hear typically about strapping the water heater in. Now with the current codes in house building, they have to have it strapped in for an earthquake. But making sure that that's done and done correctly is important. So that's another way. You don't want that to be an issue. The other thing is to make sure that you have a gas wrench attached to the gas main. You won't always need it, but just having it there and handy as part of making your home safe is a good thing to do.
Well, that brings up the whole idea of turning off the gas and electricity. Now, why is that actually important in a disaster?
Well, obviously, the natural, gas, we need to worry about that. But one of the things I'd like to emphasize is the fact that, number one, you need to be prepared to be without gas and electricity, but do not automatically turn off the gas in the event of an earthquake. Do so if you smell gas, obviously, or if there is very significant damage to the home. You should probably do that in the fear that an aftershock may create some additional damage. But you should not automatically turn it off because we don't want to have PG&E having to come back around and light the pilot lights if it's not necessary.
That makes sense. So if it's just an earthquake trembler, maybe
if there's no significant visual damage in your home and you don't smell gas, you don't need to turn it off.
The danger, I suppose, would be fire.
Fire, explosion from the gas lighting.
Sure. And what about the electricity, though? Why do we want to turn that off? What's the story there?
Well, if you have building damage, then it could cause an electrical hazard. In a flooding situation, you don't want water coming in contact with your electrical system. Let's see, electrical, there's just creates a fire.
If there's downed wires anywhere near your house, you need to stay away from those as well.
So in terms of developing your family plan, it would be practical to show each of the family members where these shutoff points are for your house, and even review that with and for the neighbors in case they're not home when the water is running down the street from their water service. How do you turn off also, all the utilities if need be?
Yeah, you mentioned a good point. I think that actually showing the kids how to do it and having them try it without turning it completely off, like you said. But actually having them see how to do it and where the tools are or whatever kind of thing. I think that's an important kind of thing.
Older, responsible children.
Yeah, of course, yes. You get your little 3-year-old out there trying to do that now. Yeah, but that's true, so that they can practice. And on a regular basis, too, because we forget how to do these things. I know young kids probably would too. And maybe, I just thought of this, when we review the kit and its contents, maybe go through the whole thing, because it might need to be upgraded in the whole plan.
Every 6 months, that'd be a great idea.
To upgrade things depending on the age of the kids and so on. So
that is really important to reemphasize that.
Yeah.
If you're safe in an emergency, you're going to naturally worry about your family members and how you're going to reunite. So having reviewed that plan, and just will provide a lot of reassurance when there is an emergency situation.
Information does show that the more you prepare, the better you will handle an emergency. And children tend to be obviously more frightened than adults might be. And so it's important that everyone be as prepared as possible, and the adults maintain a calmness about them as much as possible.
That brings up a really good question in my mind, because when we do have young kids, and even, well, all of us, but younger kids specifically, when there is an emergency kind of thing, it does shake their world. What is your recommendation as to how we as adults can actually be comforting, and how do we help the kids to actually, sort of get through this without really freaking out too much? What's the advice here?
We actually have some very specific brochures at the Office of Emergency Services on helping children cope with emergencies. But just being calm and reassuring to them, but letting them be able to express their concerns and their fears is really a good start to be able to do that.
Be able to just talk with them. Of course, we have to try to be as calm as
possible
ourselves.
Exactly. But being prepared in advance helps you be able to do that.
Right. Any other ideas on helping kids?
I would give the older kids jobs. Keep them busy so they become helpful, and answer all their questions, and help make them part of the answer too, instead of being, part of the problem. If we tend to panic or require a lot of attention, then being busy sometimes can help. In that way.
That's very true. That's very true. Well, a lot of us live with our in-laws, older folk, or maybe disabled people, and so forth. What kind of advice do we have for those of us who may be living with those people?
I think, again, preparing and having, when you're looking at preparing and having an emergency kit, it becomes as critical, or even more critical when you have people that might be elderly or disabled in some way, having battery backup for the emergency equipment that people might need. And then another point to emphasize, especially if people are living alone, is that really be working with your neighbors, knowing your neighbors, having a neighborhood plan where you check on each other and that someone is identified to check on that person.
Right, because we do have senior citizen people living by themselves in our neighborhood, and to watch out for them. That's a great idea. I like that.
It's critical that they do that and talk it with their neighbors so that there's a communication plan. Also, if there's a way to draw attention to yourself, I brought a whistle as part of this kit.
Okay.
And there's other ways, leaving notes and things like this. But if you're not able to move around very well, or if you're visually impaired, or other conditions, there is help out there.
So the idea of the
whistle, we have to
be
aware.
The idea of the whistle is for the senior citizens or the elderly, to the disabled people, to blow the whistle to draw attention to themselves that maybe they need some help at all.
Yeah, and that's
I never thought of that.
And that's part of just an emergency preparedness kit that is even just as important, or more important, that they prepare. So if you can help somebody to put something like this together, that will go a long way in an emergency.
And I go back to what you initially said a long time ago. If we do have senior citizens living with us, grandma and grandpa kind of thing, all the more important to have some backup prescription drugs for them.
And many wear eyeglasses as well.
And exactly. And in the survival kit to have the kinds of stuff for them as well, and not just for the, like we're saying. Yeah, great ideas. Now, we all have pets of some sort, not all of us, but what about them? Do we also put cat food and dog food in our survival kit too?
I believe 75% of people have pets. There's a lot of pets out there.
Yes.
In an emergency setting, they become an extra situation to care about. If we leave the pet at the house, if for some reason we had to leave the house or evacuate, we have to be able to get back in to the neighborhood to take care of the pet. It becomes an immediate concern. Also, if we bring the pet with us, should we be required to go into a shelter? Pets might not be welcome at shelters.
Yes.
So all the more important to have a plan for, do you have a carrier crate for the...
That's
it'd be nice just to mentally be prepared to have this crate, and also a leash, and maybe some bags and sanitation supplies, a little extra food and water, the same kind of thing. Pets need reassurance just like other people who are in vulnerable situations.
Absolutely.
So it's all the more important that you plan, same thing.
The other thing that's available now, if people are very concerned, are the microchips for pets. It is not unlikely that necessarily that a pet will get out and be lost for a while. But they can actually have microchips put underneath the skin now, so it helps identify the owners and reunite them together.
I think this was an issue with the Loma Prieta, wasn't it? There was a lot of animals that just got
they panicked,
freaked out,
well,
and got lost. So we found them in pounds and so on. Right? Very interesting.
Good question. Yeah.
Okay, let's say there is a disaster and we're sort of out at our meeting point and everything. How do we, as a family, get information about what's going on with the whole region or locally or whatever? Where do we get information?
The key information is going to be from the media. And we talk about the fact that KCBS is the station that we recommend most. It's 7:40 a.m. And we have an agreement and an understanding that they will get information out to us, and they will have the most updated information for people to have. So that, again, that's why it's very important
Reason to have a radio in the
have
battery.
a radio with you. If you're in your car, you have access to that as well.
Yeah, 740 KCBS, good advertisement for them. But it's because they are a constant news organization. They probably have people right on it and everything, so that's really good. Well, you know, in my neighborhood, and I'm sure neighborhoods throughout the county, there's an emergency siren that goes off. Actually, they test it third Wednesdays or something like that at 11 o'clock.
The first Wednesday of every month.
Thank you. First Wednesday, they test it. But it has gone off on several occasions, and this is for us. There's some sort of emergency or something we need to take advantage of. What? Tell us about that. What is? This is a law. What kind of disasters are they talking about when the siren does go off? Whatever.
Sure. The sirens are specifically meant for chemical emergencies or hazardous materials emergencies in Contra Costa. And along the industrial corridors where the sirens are currently, and you're right, they are tested the first Wednesday of every month at 11 o'clock. So if people in that area should be familiar, if they can be, with the sound, because it's a very different type of siren. So if they hear it at a different time other than 11 o'clock on the first Wednesday of the month, it means that they should shelter in place, that there has been a chemical emergency of some sort in their area, and that they should shelter in place, which a lot of people don't know.
I'm going to ask you what shelter in place means.
I knew that.
You saw it in my eyes.
I did. Shelter in place is actually going inside of a building and closing the doors and windows, turning off any ventilation systems, heating, air conditioning, closing the fireplace damper if there's no fire in there, and tuning to KCBS 740 for additional information. And another critical piece of shelter in place is to stay off the phone unless you have a life-threatening emergency, because they actually may be calling you with an automated phone system to let you know additional information.
Okay. Shutting the doors, just literally sheltering in place.
You're sealing
There's no
yourself.
magic to this.
Yep. You're sealing yourself away from a potential chemical if there actually is a release.
Okay, all right. So then after that, how do I know it's safe to go out? By listening to the radio?
Exactly.
Is that basically it?
Exactly.
And,
you will get the
really
all
why
clear.
that's important.
Once it's determined that it's all clear and it's safe to go about your normal business.
They won't do another siren?
They will not, typically.
So
there can be sometimes there's a question about that, but the main way to get information is, for lack of confusion, is to use the media.
Okay. So listening to the radio is such a key thing on that particular one, the shelter in place. Now, I mentioned at the start of the show we're going to talk about duck, cover, and hold. Did I get that right?
Sure.
Okay.
You did.
Now I remember that's connected with earthquakes. Is it connected with anything else? That's about it.
Not typically. What you'll always hear is stop, drop, and roll for fires,
I've heard that.
Shelter, shut, and listen for a shelter-in-place situation.
Okay, so duck, cover, and hold is earthquakes. So tell me about that. What is it?
Okay. Should there be an earthquake, we need to look around and see what's going to hurt us. And so if there are heavy objects, etc., then you need to duck under something and get protection away from the falling objects. So get next to a wall, get under a table or a desk, and cover your head, because everything in the room and in the building is moving. So whatever can fall could strike you, and that's the reason for duck and cover.
Then the hold aspect is, there's two things you can consider with holding. If there is something that you can grab onto, like if you're under a heavy table, and grab the table leg to help stabilize everything, but also hold means stay in place until the shaking stops.
Okay.
Many times people can be injured as they're running out of a building during an earthquake, because things will be falling and they could be injured as they try to leave a room. That's why the officials ask you to just stay in place.
Stay there. Until the rolling and the noise.
Duck, cover, and hold.
Another reason to bolt our things to the walls so that they don't fall over.
Yes.
Exactly. It's amazing how heavy items can travel in an earthquake.
Really?
Yes.
So it's not just falling over, but it's actually going through.
Almost lunging forward in some cases.
So tables.
Heavy tables.
Heavy tables like we have here, or dining room table, kitchen table, things of that nature. Well, thank you very much. A lot of good information here. We're going to wrap up our show for today. But remember, emergencies strike quickly and are unexpected. So preparing now can provide security and can reduce the impact of emergencies. You can begin by creating a supply kit, a home escape plan, and a first aid kit like we've talked about. Well, here are some phone numbers where you can get more information about emergency preparedness. The Contra Costa Office of Emergency Services can provide you with emergency preparedness information, brochures, and speakers. They can also give you information about forming a community emergency response team, it's hard for me to say, or CERT, in your area. Their number is 925-228-5000, 925-228-5000. The American Red Cross Bay Area chapter offers brochures and other literature with emergency preparedness information. They can provide you with basic disaster planning information, including what should be included in a first aid kit and a supply kit. They also offer emergency preparedness training for groups of 15 or more people, and their number is 925-603-7400, 925-603-7400. The Health Services Department has a pre-recorded information line that could provide you with health emergency information. The line includes information about diseases, how to prevent them, their symptoms, and treatment. The Contra Costa Public Health Emergency Line is toll-free, 1-888-959-9911. Again, that's 1-888, toll-free, 959-9911. If you have questions or comments about this show, feel free to call us at 925-313-6817, 925-313-6817. Remember, emergencies occur without warning, so prepare yourself and get ready, get healthy. See you next time.